And I want to make sure that we have time for Q&A, maybe, hopefully. And I have to apologize, I did not do a PowerPoint. This week has been a little much, so you're just going to have to listen to me talk, and I apologize for that, because I'm not the most like charismatic speaker, but that's okay. So, what? Well, thank you. It's been a week, Laura. It has been a week. All right, so we're going to talk today about faith formation for families, but that implies that anyone who doesn't have children isn't a family, and that's not true. Not only that, but we are an intergenerational, multi-generational family or community, which means that you are exposed to children even if you don't have kids yourself. Maybe as grandparents, maybe as aunts and uncles, maybe as chosen family. And so we're going to talk a little bit about faith formation in ways that are for everybody. And I will say that this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, partly because of my own personal story of having the big questions of life being thrown at me when I was a really young kid. And so when that happens, faith formation becomes a very different kind of thing than just a natural evolution of childhood. So this is something that I have worked really hard on personally, but also something that my partner and I, Elias, who is also a religious educator, albeit for adults, but he has also done it for children as well. And so we've actually given presentations like this before, and so I hope you'll find this useful. This congregation has never done a faith formation class and by that I mean tools, tips of the trade, theory, history. So today that's what we're going to talk about, so that we kind of have a grounding so that we can continue to do more of these kinds of classes in the future. We humans are spiritual beings. We seek purpose for our lives. And to seek purpose is to seek meaning and to make meaning of our lives. Meaning making is what underlines the purpose, and those are the questions of faith formation. Why are we here? What are we meant to do? How can we make the world better? Why do we suffer? What are our responsibilities to others? Why do bad things happen? The existential questions of life. And these are best answered not alone, but in community, accompanied with others who ask similar questions. And the answers to these questions are what we call faith. The core values or the guiding principles by which we live our life and by which we make meaning of our lives. And so I like the word in the Sanskrit tradition for faith best. The Sanskrit word is Shraddha, S-R-A-D-D-H-A, Shraddha, and it means where the heart rests. So how we make meaning of our experiences and purpose is dependent on where our heart rests. So if you ask any of those big questions of life, your answer is going to depend on your heart's resting place. Now, if your heart's resting place is on a marble plinth, your faith is probably determined, immovable, cold, impersonable, a bit like the faith of my own childhood. The theology of Dutch Calvinism says that God is distant and judgmental, that we're damned if we do not obey, and that we're chosen. If we're not chosen, which, by the way, isn't our decision to make, it's God's, we are not full agents on the chosen and being chosen piece. The theology of Catholicism is a bit like this as well. It has, for instance, strictures on its communication between God and the believer, right? Jesus as a personal Lord and Savior piece is not really part of Catholicism. You go through an intercessor, be it the priest or be it, Mary or other saints. In the theology of Pentecostalism, they have an understanding of the Holy Spirit's work in their lives. So it might not be necessarily so much a marble plinth because it's not so distant. It's very real and what we would call imminent or very close to us. but they also have a bit more of a structured, maybe more like a wooden-like structure for where their heart rests. So the followers of any of these traditions are going to have very vastly different faiths, their heart's resting place. So in regards to the question of why do bad things happen, a Catholic might tell you bad things happen because we live in a sinful world. A Calvinist would agree, but they might also add that we, because we are depraved human beings, add to our own suffering. And depending on the Pentecostal tradition, they might tell you that Satan or a demon is at work because of the Holy Spirit kind of beliefs. Moreover, these followers might not actually agree with or even believe their tradition's theology or doctrine. So for instance, I have been to very few Christian churches that actually have people who believe in God in them, because it's not necessary to actually believe in God. They go with it for multiple of reasons, including their own family tradition, their life experiences, but they go into their churches because it is the thing that aligns best with them, even if they don't believe in all of the structures. So you have all of these things forming faith. With that said, what I'm about to say next may sound odd, but it is entirely true. Faith is primarily formed in the home and not in church. The core beliefs that your children have or will have are formed by you. Parents, caregivers, family, and friends. You give them the answers to questions like, how are we supposed to treat people, which are the foundations of their faith. How you as adults and parents live your lives is an implicit curriculum to your children on the meaning of faith. Then, as they experience their lives, such as someone hurts them, or they find that an experience is unfair, they're going to come to you to ask you to interpret or explain those moments to them. They're probably not going to come to us. Rather, church's role is to support, to help you all. So, if what you give them is strong and maybe flexible, if that's a value you appreciate, those are the building blocks for faith, for those tough questions that they're going to experience, like what happens when someone dies? What happens when politics become violent? The foundations of their faith, which they get from you, are how they will live their lives. The church, especially you, church, is important to support you and to guide you. So that means if you all are going to impart your faith to your children as the primary faith formation people, then you all need to know what you need to know about your own faith, and that happens in church. We also support you all in this process, because I don't know of a single kid that just accepted the answer because I told you so as the reason that they believed something. You all need to have the reasons for your faith to teach your children. And historically, you churches have done that very badly. We have not done a really good job of supporting parental or adult faith formation, and that is especially true with nuns and duns who come to us either believing that they don't know, believing what they, sorry, let me rephrase this because I'm trying to think of how this would be best phrased. So people who are duns often come to us knowing what they don't believe, but not what they do believe. And UU churches have historically not actually helped people figure out what they do believe. Nuns have come to us not believing anything and not having any sort of foundation. And again, if we don't help the duns, there's no reason we would help the nuns if we don't have that faith formation pieces together. So I like to actually think about the family as the primary faith formation holders and the church as the support system, very similar to the way that we structure our UCC OWL curriculum. So the OWL curriculum is the Our Whole Lives Sexuality curriculum that we offer for our children, youth, young adults and senior citizens. And if you've ever attended an OWL orientation, you know that the purpose of OWL is to educate. It's not to form opinions or determine what is the best choice for the individual participant. How a child actually makes decisions on their sexuality, like when to become sexually active, what sexual acts to engage in, the types of relationships they're going to be in, those are formed in conversation with you all. Rather, we give the education and you all give the values. It's a little like faith formation. We are the ones who give you support. We help guide your faith formation. We reinforce your faith and your values that you're imparting to your children, but you all are the ones that give your children faith. Make sense so far? All right. So I do want to talk a little bit about some of the ways that Unitarian Universalism has failed in this capacity, and I just talked about how we've done a very poor job of forming for adults faith formation, but we have also done this in our children's religious education programs as well, because we have given them all of these wonderful ideas and information about all the different faith traditions, but we've actually given them very few actual faith values that help them form their pillows. So we will tell you about all the world's religions, but we have not historically done a really good job of saying, but this is what Unitarian Universalism is. This is how our value of inherent worth and dignity plays out in the real world. And that is something that Steve and I are actively trying to shift that narrative. Because one of the things that has happened because of this is we are the denomination that has the lowest retention rate of our youth and children out there. Yeah. I'm seeing some shocked faces because people don't realize that. It is one of the one of the most damaging things that we have done. And there are multiple components. I'm not going to say it's just one thing, but part of that is our youth and young adults, without having a sense of what their faith is, have often been really tolerant of other religious traditions, and especially if they get into multi-faith relationships with someone, they will leave our tradition and go to the other faith tradition because they have a partner who is there, but also because other faith traditions do give formation and an understanding of what is there. And we have not. So this is something that Steve and I are actively trying to work on as a part of an overall scheme, because this is something that cannot continue to happen if we're going to have a future as a faith tradition at all. So what might the heart's resting place, Shraddha, look like in a non-dogmatic, non-doctrinal way, such as in a UU congregation? So, as I mentioned, if my heart's resting place is on a marble plinth, separate and sacred, sometimes more within my head than within my heart, and I encounter a situation that I need to make meaning of that doesn't fit with what I know of my heart's resting place, hint, that's called a crisis of faith, I have a few choices. I can ignore anything that doesn't align with what I know of my heart's resting place. And we see this all the time. Somebody goes against what we thought their values were because it doesn't fit completely within the structure of their faith for me, their formed faith. And so they just ignore it. Another idea is to try to fit that idea into whatever their structure is, fit it onto the marble plinth. And that is a very real reality where we hold multiple truths that may actually be completely at war with each other, right? That is often what happens. The other thing that can happen is that the marble plinth, the heart's resting place, might actually fall apart. It could be just chipped, it could just be cracked, or the whole thing could just fall into multiple pieces and be gone. That's often what happens with the duns, the folks who have left the faith of their childhood, is that they've just had such a crisis of faith that has just disconnected them from everything else around them that it just disintegrates. No resting place is safe from testing. We always will be tested. And we'll rework, we'll tweak, we'll move our resting place, but the more a heart's resting place is adaptable, flexible, the more that it's reinforced by our parents, by our community, the more that a child can safely test those foundations in a place that will hold them, they'll be more open to love and the more likely to hold the foundations that faith will weather in the storms of life. So, what kind of things might we give our children? What is the image, the metaphor, if you will, that we might give our children for their heart's resting place? Well, the image that I like the best is one of a pillow. We want to cultivate curiosity and questioning in our children, especially around faith, but we also want to give them firm foundations. So I believe that the healthiest and strongest metaphor, if you will, is a pillow as the heart's resting place. It nurtures, it comforts. It won't shatter with questioning. It's pliable and adaptable. And a crisis of faith with a pillow as one's resting place means that when a storm comes through, we can change the cover and still protect the integrity, the stuffing, if you will, and authenticity of the faith. A pillow also allows our children to have their own autonomy through the faith formation process because it allows them to choose their pillow cover, and maybe it's sparkly and purple, or maybe it's navy blue and made of velvet, right? They can choose their own pillow, but it's not going to be destroyed or disintegrate in a crisis of faith. But with that said, we need to give them the stuffing for their pillow. Otherwise, there isn't a pillow. And so that is what we do in faith formation. We give them the stuffing of their pillow to hold them. So let me give you an example from my life. And yes, my oldest is here, so she's a primary person in this story. So when my children have always known about death, it was just a reality of our life because my mother passed away when I was 5, and I talked about this with my children so that they knew that their grandmother was a step-grandmother. But they hadn't ever really experienced death on a personal level until our neighbor and their stand-in grandfather, Mr. Jim, died. And when that happened, of course, the first question is, well, what does that mean? Like, he died? I don't understand. And I just want to name here that I have found children because they are often less concrete than adults, understand death in a different way that is much more flexible and adaptable than adults do. I've often heard folks say, well, children can't understand the reality of death as a permanent thing. No, you're right, they can't. But they can often have a broader understanding of death than what us adults can because there is not the same level of permanence in their mind as what we adults have. So when Mr. Jim died, Luna asked, well, what happens? And I did the thing that I am telling you not to do. And that is, I started telling her about all the faith traditions out there and all of the different ways people understood death and what happens afterwards. And so in the Christian tradition, they believe in heaven and hell. Like, I went through all of them. And as I was saying this to Luna, she got this look on her face, and I was like, oh, I'm losing this kid really, really quickly. And that's not good. And so at that point, I was like, well, that's not actually telling Luna what I believe. So I told Luna what I believed. And I believe that our lives are so miraculous and wonderful that I can't imagine that death just ends and it's blank darkness for the rest of eternity. I can't believe that. I don't believe in heaven or hell, but I can't believe that that is just the end. In fact, actually, the image that I used is from C.S. Lewis's The Chronicle of Narnia. In the last book, The Last Battle, Aslan, the godlike figure, brings everybody from all the worlds to his land and says, let's go on an adventure. Let's go deeper in and further in, and let us explore. And so that is what I told Luna. I said, I believe that it is not the end. I don't know what it looks like, but it's going to be a grand adventure. And you could see the light bulb go on in this kid's head. Yes, I'm totally singling you out here. And Luna took that, and she took what she knew about Mr. Jim and his love for the planet, and she created her own understanding, which was, I think Mr. Jim went into a tree. He loved the world. He's continuing on after his passing. Mr. Jim would constantly apologize to the kids for climate change, that his generation was a part of making happen. And Luna knew that, and so she put all of those pieces together, and she came up with this understanding that death meant that Mr. Jim became part of a tree. I have no idea if that's what you still believe about death, but I suspect not. But at the time, it gave Luna an answer to faith, and it was only because I gave Luna permission to start exploring her own understanding by giving myself permission to explore my own understanding of death. Does that make sense? Right. So faith is the embodiment of purpose through meaning making, and that is also, by the way, how we find our moral compass. So faith, if it's not actionable, it's not faithful to our covenant, and it's not sustainable. So it is definitely the answers to big questions and philosophical, but it is also then how we act on those answers in life. And so when we talk about faith formation, we're not just talking about raising our children well, but how they're going to change the world. Those are answering the questions of what is our responsibility to one another. Finding purpose means that we also do action, and I would say justice in the world. And so that also means we need to be clear and give real life examples to our children about what's going on in the world. Now, that does not mean like, go share in all immense gory detail this horrible thing that has happened in the world, but talk with your children about what's going on so that they can use a real world example to apply to their faith tradition. It is actually one of the easiest ways to apply something in real life to what is happening in their values. It's the playground of their lives, their everyday lived experiences, and those beyond their experiences, but what's happening in the world. And I'll tell you, our children are picking up on it anyways. It's better to have that within the framework of what's going on, within the framework of your faith in your home. It is also part of the reality for children of color to constantly be dealing with racism, for young girls to be dealing with sexism. We know that this is the reality of our lives, and so we all should be talking about all of these big things. And the example I will give you is when my partner was 6 years old, he was told he was not allowed to play Hansel and Gretel, or Hansel in the Hansel and Gretel play, because he was too dark. This is not unusual for children of color, and it is something that us as white children never encounter. I didn't understand racism until I was much, much older, but if I had, I might have been able to see the world through a more reality-filled lens than what I do. It's the same thing when girls are told that we're bad at math, or that when a boy treats us bad, it means that he likes us. Yeah, Alexis, it's okay. I roll my eyes when I hear that too. We know that's not true. Talk about it with our children and put it in context of our faith, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We believe in justice. All right. Everybody with me so far in theory and a little bit of history? Any questions?
You mentioned you recommending We have Christian nationalism around the corner.
Yeah.
And of course, go back to Constantinople, you were a Christian or you were a Protestant. And so it's not, this has happened through the centuries. And how does one deal with that? Is that a choice at all?
Yeah, so Russ was actually asking about how we deal with faith formation that's done within a coercive setting. Indoctrination is actually the word we would use for that, and Christian nationalism is absolutely an indoctrination. The sad thing to say about this is that, like, we can't counter that. I mean, we can counter it through conversations, but we can't actually change anyone's mind, right? That is lived experience, and I will tell you that, and this is speaking from personal experience with my own family, who, yes, we have lots and lots of Christian nationalistic indoctrination with my parents and my nieces and nephews and my sister, is that the best way to counter it is to expose them to different ideas. It's not completely effective. I will tell you one of the things that happened. So Elias recently had a very honest conversation with my dad about how he had a gun held to his head during a routine traffic stop in Princeton when we were first married, because he was in the wrong neighborhood, not because he had done anything bad, but because he was in the wrong neighborhood and the wrong color skin. And my dad was just totally shocked. And for a while, he understood it, but he lives in an enclave of white privilege, and so he continues to post racist things all the time on Facebook and negate all of that information. So we can expose, and it might plant seeds, but we can never change somebody's mind. They have to do that all on their own. It is part of the struggle. And I will tell you, Lissa and Justin and I had this conversation, you can talk till you're blue in the face about a different opinion, and they still might not change their mind. And that is the moment we're in right now. It's hard. It's a good question, though. Yeah. That is that marble plinth, and if they never have anything that cracks that plinth, it's not going to break. Right? And I have to say, that just makes me really sad. It just makes me really, really sad. One of the things about the Charlie Kirk situation is that he will never have the opportunity to change his mind and say he's sorry, ever. And that makes me sad. It makes me angry, but it makes me sad too. All right, so let's talk about what we can actually do in terms of faith formation. So the most fundamental and powerful tool out there is storytelling. There's a reason that religious traditions, all of them, use stories to tell their moral tales, to interpret the world, to guide their rituals. And when stories aren't there, there's an image, a metaphor. So faith like a mustard seed, right? There is some sort of visual understanding. Stories tell us how to act. They cultivate empathy. They help us to remember important things. They help us to remember people. They guide us in right action. They help us to understand the morally gray areas of life, and they help us with truth and lies and the determination of them. And when I say stories, I don't necessarily mean moral tales or parables, though absolutely, those are definitely stories, but also literally the stories of your lives. Talk to your kids about what happened when you were their age, when you encountered a bully, and talk about what you might have done differently now that you understand the world differently, not just what happened then. So the question, and we don't do a good job of this in Unitarian Universalism, but we actually have a lot of stories in Unitarian Universalism as well. And so if you're looking for any of those, I'm happy to help point you in them. You'll have to translate them for our children because we've never had anyone do that for our faith tradition, but there are definitely stories that you can tell about our faith tradition that are old and beautiful. including some of our women ministers. Cynthia Tucker, who was a member here until she passed away this past January, her entire life's work was to bring forth the stories of the women ministers of the prairie. And so the prophethood, Steve, what's the name of Cynthia's book? I always get this wrong. Yeah, it's like the Prophetic Sisterhood. Yes, thank you. I knew it had sisterhood and I knew it had prophet, but I wanted to say like the prophethood of the sisterhood, or yes. So how can we do this? We can talk about our day, including the lessons and the struggles, about the decision-making processes that you do. I know that most of you probably go home at the end of the day and are like, so Ella, how was your day at school today? That's great. Laura, how was your day? What did you learn? What tested your faith? And how are you sharing those things with your children? It's not just about them. It's also about you, because then they are learning what's going on in the world, but also you are giving them an example of what it may look like for themselves in the future. Tell the stories of the milestones, the holidays, the events that you have in your life. Tell those stories and take time to tell those stories. Your kids probably want to hear the story of their birth, maybe their conception, maybe how you struggled as a parent and you overcame whatever it is. Yes, I know, laugh about the conception piece, but I swear to God, they want to know that they were loved, that they were brought into this world in love. They want to know that. Stories. Yes, Carol.
When my daughter wanted to know about the babies,
Yes, the birds and the bees.
I said, you're better at this. So I sent him into the bedroom, and then they were done, and she came out and she said, so you did that twice.
Yes, you did that twice. That sounds perfect. Yes, and only twice. Yes. Yep. That sounds exactly perfect. But they want to know that you loved each other. It's important. The stories of your lessons learned are especially important as your kids get older. And of course, religious stories. And I have a couple of books down here that you are welcome to go ahead and take a look at. The one caveat I want to say about religious stories specifically is I really struggle with religious stories that have been made into children's stories, because there is a filter that gets put on those stories. I mean, the whole point of religious story is to constantly have them bringing you new revelation. And this is literally what the Jewish faith tradition has done for over 2 millennia, is that they literally go in and Havruta is the practice of 2 people arguing about a particular piece of scripture, and the many, many meetings that include, historical, cultural, societal norms of the time, right? And new revelations come out of that. When you do children's religious stories, often that practice gets taken away. It often gets filtered through a particular interpretation, and that is the only interpretation. And so part of the ambiguity of religious stories is that they're supposed to be flexible, and new meaning happens as you evolve and understand the world. So it's actually okay to read the stories of the Bible as the stories of the Bible and not through a particular child's lens. We did this actually during the pandemic. We chose, instead of going to church through Zoom on Sunday morning, we read the Bible for 2 hours. I'm not joking. And when we got to the David and Jonathan story, as the kids were coloring, Luna snaps her head up and she goes, wait, and they were supposed to be straight? Are you kidding me? Because the story itself is got interpretation that's just so wildly different. And if you were 11, 12, 13 at the time, if she could get it, well then, kids can get these things. It's always better to have the real thing rather than that filtered understanding. The other technique that is adjacent to stories are rituals. So rituals are the way that we share faith and meaning-making tools with our children through embodied moments of action meant to tell stories and to mark an occasion. Rituals are often culturally specific, but they don't have to be. So if you have a particular family cultural tradition, rituals are a great opportunity to express those things. And you can create everything from really simple, everyday rituals that impart your faith values to like really big, expansive things. So, and a lot of folks do rituals around the seasons, the nature. So, you know, a bonfire on the solstices, a special meal on some of the pagan traditions. I actually have a book here that you can take a look at if you want, if that's kind of your thing. I've actually got a couple of books on that. And children can not only help with telling the stories, but they can help with the creation of the ritual and the participation of the ritual itself. So let me give you a quick example. You all made little chalices a few months ago here. Light those chalices before every meal and say a grace, a time of gratitude. Our grace has not changed. We were just talking about this as a family. Our grace hasn't changed since our children were little. So we still, even with teenagers, sit around the table and say, thank you, Earth, for making this food. Thank you, Mommy and Daddy, for working so hard so that we can have food to eat. And thank you, name whoever made the food. That is our ritual. And it is very simple, but it is enough to show gratitude to the earth and to the people who provided for the food. It could be whatever it is for you all. A morning and bedtime ritual. We used to sing, when it was my turn to put the kids to bed, hymn number 1 in our hymnal, which is the only hymn of invocation that we have in our hymnal. And it is literally like, protect the house, protect the building, protect, and so we used to sing that. And that was our song. When Elias put them together, it was lift every voice and sing. But, you know, whatever your tradition is, a ritual song, especially one from our own hymnal, you can absolutely do without too much, once you figure out the tune, because some of the hymnal songs in the hymnal are a little sketchy. A ritual for saying goodbye. So until the kid, well, and sometimes I even still do this if I'm up and moving by the time the kids head out to school, I share with the kids the same goodbye every day. Be good, but not too good. Shine like a star. Remember that I love you forever and always. And that is for me, what that's imparting is I want you to treat everyone with respect, but if something is unjust, I want you to challenge it. That's that be good but not too good piece of it. I want them to be their best selves, shine like that star. And in a day and age when school shootings are constantly happening, I want them to know that they are loved absolutely. So in a moment of panic, they are not wondering where they stand on our love. That is how I leave my children every day. Not so much now, but it is something that they know. The other thing about ritual that is less about like, let's do these steps to remember this or whatever, is having rituals that allow children to pause. So I actually am a firm believer in the Sabbath, in a day of rest. And maybe it can't be a day because of all of the things you have going on in your lives, and maybe it can only be a couple of hours. Let me share a bit about my own day of rest when I was a child. So on Sundays was our Sabbath day. Now, this is partly cultural and partly my religious tradition, but my grandparents weren't allowed to use scissors on Sunday because that was working, and the food that was made for the Sunday midday dinner was made the night before because you didn't work on the Sabbath. Now, my parents weren't quite that strict, but on Sundays, I would go to church at 8:30, Sunday school, family dinner, afternoon of rest, and then church again at 6 p.m. on Sunday evening. It wasn't fun. It definitely wasn't fun. Because I wasn't allowed to go swimming, and I wasn't allowed to play with friends. I did all of those things, and I came home, and my sister and I, if we were lucky, we would play, but we had to be quiet in the afternoons because my dad always took his afternoon nap. That was my upbringing. And now, mind you, I would never do that to my children, and I think that there are definitely downfalls for such a strict conservative upbringing around the Sabbath. I don't necessarily believe that any of those rules damned me to hell, for instance, if we broke them. But what I will say is that what it did give me is an appreciation for rest, for sacred time and sacred space, which I don't know that I would have had in a different concept, in a different setting. It is important that our children understand that it's okay to slow down. It's okay not to have something fill their lives. It's okay to take care of themselves. This is mindfulness practice at its finest. It is time to set aside sacred space and sacred time, which is different from everyday time. And if that is just coming to worship on Sunday morning, great, then come to worship on Sunday morning. But the concept of slowing down and having a day or some hours where there's nothing but this thing or nothing but space and time to breathe is good. And it cares for them. It is a value that you are imparting to them. Ritual also allows for processing of harm and grief. And when I talk about grief, I'm not necessarily just talking about death. I'm also talking about they lost their favorite stuffed animal, and they're never going to get that thing back because it got thrown away or whatever it is. Processing that through ritual is a really good way of saying goodbye. I have books up here for all kinds of ritual, but I will tell you, we as a church do this, and you can talk to Kat about fire communion. You can talk about winter solstice. We do ritual here all the time, and so there are lots and lots of ways that you can create rituals in your own everyday things, from even just small little things to big things. We have a friend who she has a ritual practice. I'm not really sure what you'd call it, but she is a firm believer in the interdependent web of creation. And whenever there is a bug in her home, she captures it and lets it go. But because she wants to make that value known to her children, one of the things that she does is she has this little saying, and they all walk outside, they let the creature go, and they say, "Be free and prosper." Just not in my house. And so that is, it's silly. It's absolutely silly, but what you're doing is you're creating a time and a space, a sacred moment to set aside from all the other things you're doing that then imparts that value to your child, whatever it is. Every moment is a possibility for ritual, for storytelling, for faith formation. And some of that's very implicit and not lecture-y, right? Adjacent to ritual are altars. So how many of you have altars in your house? That's awesome. I was expecting like no hands, so I'm really excited about that. We have, 6 altars. Your father has 3, I think, all of his own, depending on which, for different things. Altars can be a number of different things. I have my altar on a dresser. Luna has her altar on a bookshelf in her bedroom. We have an altar in Elias's office. We have an altar on the top of my desk in my office. And altars can have anything on them. They can be altars to ancestors. With pictures of beloved ones. They could be altars that remind us of the seasons. That's mine. I have birds' nests and rocks and turtle shells and all kinds of things that remind me that I am part of something bigger, the interdependent web, but I'm also part of the natural cycles of life. However you want to use altars, you can use altars. And you can incorporate rituals into them. So I know folks who light candles every morning with either a saying of affirmation, I am loved, I am beautiful, I am kind, those kinds of things. They could also just be gratitude for the day. You could meditate in front of your altar. You can invoke the memory of somebody who you loved. But altars also don't need to be on anything. My grandmother in her house had a wall in her hallway that had all of the pictures of her parents and her aunts and uncles and my cousins and all of those. And every so often I would walk down that aisle with my aunt and she would tell me the stories of all of those people. That is an altar. It might not be something that's on a tabletop with all of the things on it, but it is a form of an altar where you're telling stories, remembering values. And for me, that was also a part of our cultural history because it was my great-grandparents who came from the Netherlands. And so for us, part of that was understanding the cultural. So I would hear stories like my great-grandfather got caught in the woods one time and was hunted by the Queen's men because apparently she was in the vicinity and he didn't know that, and so he was running through the woods and the Queen's men were chasing him, and somehow or another he ripped his pants and his underbroekies showed, which, underwear, but that's the Dutch term for it. And so I know it's silly, but there were cultural pieces of that. There are the stories of my history, which is important. All of those are part of your faith formation. Includes not just your values, but your history. And so that's all part of faith formation. Let's see here. The only thing I want to say about altars and rituals is just to be careful of misappropriation of traditions that are not your own. There are altars that Elias and the children have that I would never touch because as a white person, it's not mine to own or touch. They're not my culture. But stuff that either their indigeneity or their African, Elias has altars that are in the Santeria tradition because he is a Santero, a priest in the Santeria tradition, which is a combination of Yoruba and Catholicism founded in the Caribbean. That's not mine. I can't touch that. And that's okay. I don't need to touch it, but I'm just careful and and respectful for other people's traditions that are not my own. So all of those are some pretty basic techniques, but there are some things that overlap with our values in different ways. So for instance, taking your children to vote is actually what I would say the basis of faith formation. It's our democratic value, it's enacting justice in the world. And my kids know that before they're 18, they have to learn to swim, they have to learn to drive, and they will vote. Oh, they have to learn to ride a bike. And they will vote. And if they don't vote after they turn 18, their mother will fly wherever they are and pull them out of bed and make sure that they go vote, because this is part of our values, both as a faith tradition, but also a value of my own that I want to make sure my kids know. Other ways, take your kid to a protest or have them make a protest sign. Talk to them about what's happening in the world and how they can apply their own values to those circumstances. And it actually brings down fear and empowers children when they know that they can actually act on the things of the world through their values. I think that's all I have for the moment. Steve and I will be doing a few more of these workshops, either directly related to faith formation or adjacent to them in the coming weeks, so please stay tuned. Does anyone have any questions in the meantime? Yeah, Russ?
I think to build your personal theology is related to this.
Yes.
Because it forces us to ask all the questions and really makes you uncomfortable to be able to figure it out.
Yeah, so Russ was talking about the Building Your Own Theology course that we offer that he actually facilitated this past spring. That is actually one of, and especially the way that Steve has reworked the curriculum, is just one of the best faith formation opportunities as adults. And you can replicate that for your own kids. And actually, we do that through our coming of age and through our TAG program here. But in the meantime, all of the what leads up to those big formational moments of our children's lives are the everyday things that you all do with your children. Yeah?
If you have kids in religious education,
And actually added to that, so Russ was saying that if you have kids in RE, make sure that you definitely ask them about what's happening. And if you noticed last week, Steve sent out an email after religious ed that gives you like talking points. Because I find that kids, especially when they're young, and you give them the free form like, what did you do today? They're like, oh, I don't know, right? They do know. So having specific questions to ask are really helpful. There is one thing that I forgot to mention, and this is, I will say that one of the biggest faith formation tools you can give your children is actually worship and not religious education. That's not to say religious education isn't important. Yes, it absolutely is. But worship imparts the Sabbath, it imparts intergenerational community, it imparts the sacred community held together. I know children don't get every single thing out of worship, but worship is literally the biggest church support system that we can give our children to let them understand what it is to hold sacred time and space and our values together. So that is another big thing, and you can incorporate it in your Sabbath practices, whatever that is. Our Sabbath practices, we go out to breakfast every morning, every Sunday morning as a family. We go to Pete's and have our coffee. It's also the only way I'm going to get Lucian out of bed in the morning. Bribe him with coffee and food. But we sit there and we don't have our phones, we talk, and then we come to church together. That's our family tradition. You can create your own, whatever that might look like. There are lots of ideas. All right, so I have some books up here that you are welcome to take pictures of if they would be helpful to you. Everything from, there's a great children's book here on life and death if you've never had a conversation with your child about that. And I will tell you, having a conversation preemptively about death before it actually happens can be like literally one of the greatest gifts you give yourself and your child. Because otherwise it can be a really huge shock, especially if somebody really important in your life dies. So that's a big one. There is a great book here called Raising White Kids that is specifically about how to talk to your kids as white parents to your white children. But I will tell you that the skills that are in there can be used for any of the isms. It is literally one of my favorite books. And Jennifer Harvey, I think, is now actually at Garrett Theological School. Maybe we should have her come down and talk. She's fabulous. And then the other book that I would really, really recommend is Sharon Delos' Park, Big Questions, Worthy Dreams. And that one is just the foundational tenets, including expanding on that concept of Shraddha, the heart's resting place, if you want to have more of the theory stuff. All right? Great. Thank you all. I hope you found this helpful.